Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be talking about the next ground class topic, which is assessment of students in topics in which they have taken ground instruction. So, what is an assessment? Assessment is something that is used to analyze how the student is behaving, how the student is performing, whether they are learning or not, how they're performing in the different topics or different maneuvers or whatever it is, and how do we as instructors have how we can check their performance, their growth and learning. So it's basically essential to analyze and judge the student performance, because the student looks up to the instructor for guidance and feedback. The student will be expecting the instructor to tell them where they went wrong and how they can improve on the different techniques. So the instructor must gather information needed to evaluate the student performance. So assessment in a way allows us to gather that information to understand how and where the student might be lacking. So that is why assessment is very crucial and an important aspect of the learning phase. Now, each of these ground topics, as we are discussing in these videos, they are equally critical and important for your AFI oral interview, as well as to improve your skills as an instructor. So try to understand what the concepts are, and you can learn and get a basic overview of all the topics that we are covering. The previous topic we covered was techniques of applied instruction. So in the previous video we've covered everything there is to that particular topic. And the assessment topic that we'll cover today, it's comparatively a little bit short, but we'll try to make sure that all the points are there. And let's get on with it. So assessments can generally be of two types. There is a traditional assessment and there is an authentic assessment. So a traditional assessment is something which is more like the common standard type of an exam that you see out there, maybe an MCQ, or a written exam, or something like fill in the blanks or something like that. So it's a pretty basic, the standard pattern that is followed uh, everywhere, which is known as a traditional assessment. Whereas an authentic assessment is something where you have to apply the things that you've learned properly. You have to use the skills that you've learned on a particular task and complete it. So for example, a written test that you'll be giving, that would be a traditional assessment, and a skill test that you give in the aircraft, that will be more like an authentic assessment. The Besides the assessment, we will also be talking about rubric. So rubric is basically sort of like a set of guidelines or a set of grades that can be there, which allows us to grade the student in different assessments that are there. So rubric is sort of like a set of guidelines for helping to grade the student. Now, talking besides traditional and authentic assessments, the assessments can be carried out in two different ways. They can be formal or informal. A formal assessment could be something with proper documentation, with proper exam paper and answer sheets, and the MCQ, the sheets that you fill up for the MCQ answers. So it could be a proper assessment with written documentation. And an informal assessment could be something that could be more like a verbal communication with the cadet, something that happens either one on one or maybe in a group. So that could be more like an informal assessment. Now there are three other types of assessments as well, so I'll just tell you those. One is a diagnostic assessment. So diagnostic is something that you do before doing a particular task. It's more like to see what is the base level of the student, whether they have the required knowledge for that particular exercise or not, more like an entrance exam. So that is like a diagnostic test or a diagnostic assessment. The next is a formative assessment. Formative is something that is not graded and used as a wrap up lesson. So once, let's say, you did a classroom briefing and then you did some verbal question and answers with the cadets and something like that. So that acts as a formative assessment. The third is a summative assessment. So summative is something that is done periodically to measure the learning and the growth of the cadet. Something like in schools they do the weekly tests or half yearly tests, something like that. So something that is happening in a periodic manner again and again, that is more like a summative assessment that is there. Besides this, let's also talk about the characteristics of an assessment. What should an assessment be like? What should it include? How do we know whether an assessment which is being, a test which is being taken by the instructor is good or not? So these are the characteristics of an assessment that it should have. So it should be objective, it should be comprehensive, it should be thoughtful, flexible, constructive, specific, acceptable, and organized. So more or less, many of these words are similar, but they all have their specific meanings, and it allows you to make your assessment more organized, more perfect for each of the candidates, because you'll have a variety of candidates in your test grading zone, because you'll be teaching a variety of candidates. So you have to make sure that the assessment is suitable to all of them. Student performance being influenced by personal views is known as halo error. So this is something that we also talked about in the previous video, where if an example would be, if an instructor is mingling too much with the candidates, if they're being over friendly, or doing a lot of party and enjoying together, it can lead to a human factor which is known as halo error, where the instructor might develop, knowingly or unknowingly, a bias towards that particular candidate. They might feel as if they will be a little softer towards that candidate, towards their grading and their performance, and they'll allow some other factors, and this eventually leads to the halo error. What the halo error signifies is more like favoring and sympathy towards that particular candidate. So it's best not recommended to mingle too much with the candidates to avoid such an error. What is a good assessment? A good assessment is something that should be reliable, something that should be valid, usable, objective, comprehensive, and allows for discrimination between students. So overall speaking, an assessment is something that you are doing as an instructor to understand and evaluate your students performance, to help them improve in areas where they're lacking, and to provide them feedback on the same, to make sure that all your candidates are getting the proper training as required, all your candidates are not feeling left out or biased, all your candidates are able to understand from the same assessment the areas where they could be lacking. In the authentic assessment, student will perform real tasks and applications, as we've talked before. There could be open-ended questions, which could be like a collaborative assessment, trying to do a group discussion. That's more like a collaborative assessment, where people will discuss their different ideas and the things that they have encountered. Then grading on procedures, single pilot resource management, grades and different exercises will be managed as per different grading. So these are just a few, it's like an overview of what assessments is all about. It's an overview of the second topic of AFIR ground instruction, where in your interview, and as for in your interview, they'll ask you this very basic question, okay, tell us what are the different types of assessments that are there, and how do you assess a candidate, what are the things required for a assessment to be good and unbiased. So these are the few basic things that they can ask you in the interview, as well as an instructor, when you are flying with a different variety of candidates, you should be aware of these things, how to manage them, how to teach them all with the same standard, how to not have a bias towards any particular candidate. So these things are what we need to understand out of this entire topic. So that is all for the assessments part. We will be talking about the next topic of AFIR instruction in the next video. And if you have any questions or any queries, any doubts, you can just post them in the comments below. And thank you for watching.